Good morning, everyone. Let us begin. Our call to worship today is courtesy of Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner. You are welcome here. If you are straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, intersexual, demisexual, pansexual, or asexual, or resist labels completely, you are whole and welcome here. If you are transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, or cisgender, you are whole and welcome here. Pardon me. If you are confused about your sexuality, have questions, struggle in an intimate relationship, or struggle because you aren't in one, you are whole and welcome here. If you have had an abortion or an unintended pregnancy, given up a child, had a miscarriage, have AIDS or HIV, struggle with infertility or sexual dysfunction, you are whole and welcome here. If you've been the victim of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, or sexual assault, you are whole and welcome here. If you have made sexual decisions or bad behaviors or had behaviors that you regret, you are welcome here, and we will help you offer restorative justice and healing. Your sexuality is holy and sacred, and an integral part of who you are. You are whole and welcome here. As Unitarian Universalists, we will side with you, love you, and fight for your rights. We seek to create a world where sexuality and sexual diversity is celebrated with holiness and integrity.
Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Midland's multi-platform worship service. My name is Marcia McDonald. I am a board member at large, and I am the worship associate today. For those joining online, please type into the chat box who you are and who you have brought with you today. We will be recording this service, but personal sharing will be edited out. For those here in person, please silence your phones. Unitarian Universalism is a welcoming and inclusive religion. It encourages us to keep open hearts and minds because our own experience, conscience, and reason are the final authorities in religion. It affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every person and that we are all connected to each other and the earth. A special welcome to any visitors today. We appreciate you spending some of your Sunday morning with us. If you have any questions, please let us know in person, in the chat box, by phone, or through our Facebook page. If you are considering becoming a member of the fellowship, please contact our minister, Reverend Eric Severson, our office administrator, Wendy Altmeyer, or let us know of your interest in person in the chat box or on the visitor sign-in sheet. Watch for new member orientation sessions in coming months. If you have a chalice or candle at home and would like to join in our chalice lighting remotely, now would be a good time to get that ready. We will include joys and sorrows this morning, which we have asked you to submit in advance. If you are on Zoom and didn't have a chance to, please enter your joy or sorrow in the chat box at this time. Here are some headlines from this week's newsletter. Next week's service, led by Judith Hill, will ask whether good fences ever make good neighbors, and what walls we have built lately might need tearing down. The next committee and ministry team leader meeting will be Sunday, February 13th, at 2 p.m. by Zoom. We will regroup and discuss where we think we are heading. At-home COVID tests are available for free through the United States Postal Service. The link is in your newsletter. Our religious education team seeks volunteers for a variety of simple tasks. If you would like to help, see instructions in your newsletter or online. The engagement team is seeking Sunday greeters for February and beyond. If you would like to volunteer, please contact Kathy Kinkema.
And just a reminder to see your Candle Flame newsletter, the UUFOM News Facebook group, or uufom.org for all the latest events and upcoming news. For our chalice lighting today, I share the words of Darcy Baxter and colleagues. With the kindling of this flame, we reaffirm our commitment to accept life's gifts with grace and gratitude, and to use them to bless the world in a spirit of love. Thank you, Marcia. Melanie and I will now share our first interlude, a combination of We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle with words by Carol Etzler to a tune of an African-American spiritual, and Circle Round for Freedom by Linda Hirschhorn. We are dancing Sarah's circle. We are dancing Sarah's circle. We are dancing Sarah's circle. Sisters, brothers, all. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for each soul. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
Wow.
As a pastoral response, I'd like to share with you a prayer for our elected officials by Jessica Halperin, adapted to include our appointed officials, such as our Supreme Court justices. Spirit of love and justice, be with us today and always. We take to the streets, we write letters, we sing and worship and gather in community. Remind us that our gatherings are sacred because you are there. Spirit of love and justice, be with our elected and appointed officials today and always. In the difficult work they are called to do, in the choices they must make, and the lives that they change, remind them that the work they do is sacred, filled with opportunities to bring more love and justice into the world. Spirit of love and justice, we know that life is complicated and that no choice is easy and without repercussions. We know that the complexities of this world is what brings us together as people in sacred community, so that we may better know and remember the love and justice that guide our footsteps. We are grateful for the choices we can make, for the freedom and dignity and life-giving power that we claim when each of us makes a choice that is right for us. Sometimes you whisper in our ears, Spirit, and sometimes we hear the roar of your presence in the voices of people raised in witness. You make yourself available to us, to every one of us, and we gather in prayer today to ask you to be with us and with everyone we meet. May every one of us and every one of our elected and appointed officials hear and heed your cries, Spirit of love and justice. May we be grateful for the complicated choices that each of us have to make, and recognize that those choices are not only opportunities to bring more love and justice into the world, but that those choices are the products of justice in our world. That discernment and conscience are sacred rights bestowed to each of us. May we and our elected and appointed officials live fully into these gifts of choice and sacred discernment, and may they always be used to sustain more love and more justice. Amen. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give. Thank you, Melanie.
That was so beautiful. Our first reading today is a reproductive justice definition from the website wetestify.org. Reproductive justice as a framework reflects the ways racism, anti-Blackness, xenophobia, misogyny, capitalism, white supremacy, structural inequity, and ableism contribute to the erasure and marginalization of people seeking reproductive health care and the ability to create families on their own terms. Reproductive justice strives for a world where people have access to the full spectrum of reproductive health care, including abortion, contraception, prenatal, gynecological, and gender-affirming care, and comprehensive sex education, as well as a world free from state-sanctioned violence and government systems that coerce and harm families. The vision of reproductive justice cannot be achieved without racial and economic equity and the ability to decide if, when, and how to grow our families. Our second reading is from the 2015 UUA Statement of Conscience on Reproductive Justice. As Unitarian Universalists, we embrace the reproductive justice framework, which espouses the human right to have children, not to have children, to parent the children one has in healthy environments, and to safeguard bodily autonomy and express one's sexuality freely. The reproductive justice movement was founded at a time when the unique range of issues faced by women of color was not addressed by the predominantly white middle-class women's rights and reproductive rights movement, nor the predominantly male civil rights movement. Those issues have included forced sterilization, forced contraception, and higher rates of removal of children from families due to accusations of abuse or neglect. These issues, coupled with systemic racism, have frequently made parenting or co-parenting more difficult due to many factors, including, but not limited to, discriminatory and unequal implementation of laws and incarceration rates, prohibitions imposed on people after incarceration, unjust immigration policies, and economic insecurity. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to uphold our 7 principles. The first, second, and sixth principles are the most applicable to reproductive justice. We are all relational beings with varying abilities, preferences, and identities. Unitarian Universalism calls us to advocate for the positive expression of sexuality, including choices about reproduction and nurturing, and for a culture of respect and empowerment. Our commitment to our principles calls us to support and partner with oppressed communities as we work together to build the world we dream about. In order to embody our principles, we as Unitarian Universalists must listen to and follow the lead of those from the affected communities, especially women of color, and reach outside our cultural assumptions. Our interlude today, played and sung by Melanie Willison, is the song Little Green, written by Joni Mitchell in 1971. The song is included in a playlist of songs of our reproductive lives, gathered by journalist Farah Diaz-Tello in the Rewire News Group. Diaz-Tello describes the song as a rare autobiographical song about placing a child for adoption, in which singer Joni Mitchell recounts her own experience of placing a daughter she named Kelly, as in green, for adoption in her early 20s during the baby scoop era. During this time, after World War II, but before birth control and abortion were widely available in the United States and Canada, millions of young white women placed newborns for adoption under pressure to avoid unwed motherhood. At the time, virtually all adoptions were closed, meaning that the birth parents would have no contact with the child, and the adoptee might not have any record of their birth parent. The prevailing philosophy was that an adoption should be seamless and the birthing parent invisible, which led to shaming and stigma of women who chose adoption. Mitchell, who refers to herself as a child with a child in the song, became pregnant by a nonconformer who left Canada for California. Realizing she is unable to give the child a happy ending, she sings her own complex feelings after signing all the papers in the family name. You're sad and you're sorry, but you're not ashamed. Mitchell eventually met her adult biological daughter, Kilauren Gibb, in the late 1990s.
Choose her a name she will answer to. Call her green, and the winters cannot fade her. Call her green for the children who have made her little green. Be a gypsy dancer. He went to California, hearing that everything's warmer there. So you write him a letter and say, her eyes are blue. He sends you a poem and she's lost to you. Little green, be a nonconformer, just a little spring is born. There'll be crocuses to bring to school tomorrow. Just a little green, like the nights when the northern lights perform. There'll be icicles and birthday clothes, and sometimes there'll be sorrow. Child with a child pretending, weary of lies you are sending home. So you sign all the papers in the family name. You're sad and you're sorry, but you're not ashamed. Little green, have a happy ending. Just a little green, like the colors when the spring is born. There'll be crocuses to bring to school tomorrow. Just a little green, like the nights when the northern lights perform. There'll be icicles and birthday clothes, and sometimes there'll be sorrow.
Thank you, Melanie. The spring 2013 issue of UU World magazine included an article by Darcy Baxter titled, "What is Reproductive Justice?" She began with the story of her time with a national abortion hotline, counseling a woman named Melissa. Understanding that Melissa's situation was desperate, she gave her some uncommon advice. She told Melissa to go to church. "I know this is going to sound crazy," she said into the phone, "but it's the only thing I can think of right now. There's a Unitarian Universalist church 100 miles from you. Give them a call." After she hung up the phone, another counselor peeked over the cubicle divider and asked, "Did you just send that woman to a church to get help with an abortion?" Yes, I did." She goes on to explain, "I did not think twice about sending Melissa to the closest UU congregation. Why? Because church was the only place my parents could send me to get a high-quality comprehensive sexuality education. Because while I was growing up, my minister told stories of being part of a network of Protestant and Jewish clergy who connected women with safe abortion providers. Because Unitarian Universalists, Jews, and Buddhists have been even more supportive of legal abortion than those who identify as religiously unaffiliated. And because the Roe v. Wade legal case was forged in the basement of First Unitarian Church of Dallas, Texas. It is quite a remarkable story. And I'll return to that article in a little bit. Let me pause to acknowledge that much of the information and language I share today is adapted from the works of the Reverends Rob Keithan and Ashley Horan and others at the UUA's Side with Love campaign. I want to acknowledge that each of us may have our own stories about sexuality, pregnancy, or abortion, and I invite you to share these stories another day when the situation and circumstances seem right to do so. Into the 1970s, religious conservatives had organized themselves politically around protecting racially segregated schools. But 5 to 6 years later, they realized they could no longer justify rallying their followers to that cause. In 1978, they realized that anti-abortion positions could help them win elections. And so began the debate as we know it. Dartmouth College professor Randall Ballmer described this shift in his 2014 Politico magazine article, "The Real Origins of the Religious Right." The anti-abortion campaign has never been about faith or freedom. It has always been about social and political control. This year marks the 49th anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision by the U.S. Supreme Court legalizing abortion nationwide. Today, polling finds that roughly half of Americans, 48%, said that having an abortion is morally wrong. 20% said it is morally acceptable, 31% said it's not a moral issue. According to the Pew Research Center, currently 59% say abortion should be legal in all or most cases, and 39% say it should be illegal. But a Washington Post ABC News poll in November found that 3/4 of Americans say abortion access should be left to women and their doctors. So 75% of people are able to distinguish between their own beliefs and what decisions should be left up to others. According to the pro-choice research organization, the Guttmacher Institute, state houses across the country have quietly enacted more than 1,300 abortion restrictions since Roe v. Wade was decided. Packed as it is today with a majority of conservative justices, it seems all but inevitable that this decision will be struck down by the Supreme Court sometime this summer. So the immediate problem is that if the Supreme Court overturns or guts that decision, 26 states are certain or likely to ban abortion, including Michigan. So deciding how to respond to that is a most pressing problem. But I also would like us to take a step back to see the bigger picture. Restrictions on abortion access is only one piece of the much larger and complex problem of reproductive injustice. Reproductive injustice is a long-term systemic problem. It is about controlling people's bodies, voices, and choices. It is a legacy of the systemic racism that has existed since before this nation was founded. The history of reproductive injustice includes stories from women like Joni Mitchell about the heartbreaking social pressures involved in bearing and giving up a child before birth control and abortion were widely available. It includes stories of queer and non-binary, non-gestational parents being denied the opportunity to witness their child being born. It includes stories of Native American women whose access to federally insured health care depends on the ability or willingness of the state in which they live to provide such services. It includes stories of forced sterilization of prisoners, migrants, and persons with mental illness or disabilities. Reproductive justice includes access to contraception, to health care, and to adequate health insurance, but it is far more than just a women's issue. It affects all of humanity because reproductive rights are human rights. The reproductive justice framework was developed by a group of black women in 1994 to articulate this broader approach to the work and a different process. Among other things, the reproductive justice framework requires bringing a racial justice analysis to all aspects of the work. We know just from the coronavirus pandemic that the inequities of our health care system overwhelmingly affect Black, Indigenous, and other persons of color more than anyone else, as well as transgender, non-binary, and other marginalized persons. Darcy Baxter now is the Reverend Darcy Baxter. She has been, among other things, Director of Family Ministry at Star King Unitarian Universalist Church in Hayward, California. Her UU World article, just over 8 years ago, was among the first to familiarize Unitarian Universalists with the concept of reproductive justice. And the resulting conversation led in 2015 to the Statement of Conscience, approved by congregations at our National General Assembly. As Unitarian Universalists, it says, we embrace the reproductive justice framework, which espouses the human right to have children, not have children, to parent the children we have in healthy environments, and to safeguard bodily autonomy and express one's sexuality freely. The statement provides us with a theological grounding for this work and a list of internal and external actions. Now, how many of you remember what you were doing about 6 or 8 years ago? It seems so long ago. I have to admit that if I saw or heard anything about this going by, I must not have been paying attention. I found reviewing Reverend Baxter's article very helpful. She continued, reproductive justice is both a concept and a movement that calls on us to focus on a woman's lived realities and the complex interdependent web of circumstances that must exist for her to exercise what we call rights. Reproductive justice emphasizes that everything is connected and therefore insists we refuse to isolate or pit important social issues against each other. Instead, reproductive justice advances these rights across the interdependent web of social justice issues. As the advocacy group Forward Together puts it in their Strong Families initiative, reproductive justice calls on us to work towards a world where every person and family has the rights, recognition, and resources to make decisions about their gender, their bodies, and their sexuality. Where every person, family, and community has what they need to flourish. While the Statement of Conscience refers to the first, second, and sixth UU principles, for Reverend Baxter, it comes back to our first and seventh, to the tension of the me and we. Reproductive justice calls on us to resist focusing either on the inherent worth and dignity of every person or the interdependent web of existence. Reproductive justice is about holding both at the same time. We are all people with inherent worth and dignity who cannot thrive outside of the interdependent web of existence. I especially like what she wrote next because I feel it is well within our ability to make happen. All of us are many things at once, even though we often feel a need to hide or highlight one part over another. For me, religious community is about a place of connection and interconnection. It is about building a space where all parts of us can show up, where we do not have to be singular, tidy, and complete. Religious community should be a place where each of us can bring our multiple, messy, in-process selves. Reproductive justice requires that we recognize the intersections of all injustices, welcome a greater awareness of our own cultural contexts and subconscious biases, and open our hearts to all we do not yet understand. Take one of our songs today as an example. The openly feminist song, "We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle," was written in response to the male-centered imagery of "We are climbing Jacob's ladder." But Sarah's circle, too, was written at a certain time, from a certain perspective. Today, those who are transgender or non-binary may find its repeated labels of sisters and brothers exclusionary. And while it relies on the tune of an African-American spiritual and features the Jewish matriarch Sarah, Sarah too has her flaws. The lyrics leave out the Torah's description of how Sarah abused her slave Hagar. So, on and on, the circle of our awareness is moving and evolving. Given this newfound understanding of the interrelated and systemic issues of reproductive justice, what are we called to do? Next slide, Sarah, please. I suggest that we individually or collectively continue to learn more. I invite you to turn to some of the resources available on your screen. The Unitarian Universalist Association has a page on reproductive justice with links to many other resources, including the full text of the 2015 Statement of Conscience. Visit the National Abortion Rights Action League, NARAL, to learn about reproductive health and rights laws in Michigan. Visit If, When, How for information about reproductive justice in the prison system. See the National Abortion Federation hotline and We Testify for abortion information and advocacy for people who have abortions. And check out the Spiritual Alliance of Communities for Reproductive Dignity, or SACRED, for an interfaith congregational certification program on reproductive health and justice. We also could continue having worship services and other programming on the intersectional nature of reproductive justice, as well as conversations about how this framework is in line with work we've already done or might do. We could provide non-judgmental, affirming pastoral care related to sexual and reproductive health issues and explicitly let people know about it. We could connect with and provide support to a local reproductive health care center, such as Planned Parenthood of Michigan. We could work with UU state advocacy networks, congregations, and other organizations to plan educational or mobilization efforts. There are many things we could do, individually or collectively. So with open minds, helping hands, and loving hearts, let us turn whatever disappointment may come from our elected and appointed officials in coming months into motivation to work toward reproductive justice. Let us commit to replacing insecurity with safety, replacing fear with acceptance, replacing judgment with love, and replacing shame with compassion. Reverend Baxter ended her UU World article with these words: "Let this reproductive justice work be a way for us, all of us, to nurture our practices of justice and care in our shared, messy, lived, and interdependent community. Let us strive to create a space in which each of us can be our multiple, messy, in-process selves. May it be so. Blessed be and amen."
In accord with our values and the stirrings of our hearts, we now invite you to support the mission of this fellowship financially. Please take a moment to write a check or to make a note to donate online at uufom.org. For those in person, the offering plate will be available as you exit today. Your offering is greatly appreciated and gratefully received. Thank you. Our offertory music is a reprise of Circle Round for Freedom and the last verse of We Are Dancing Cyril's Circle, shared with us today by Melanie and Reverend Eric.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. On and on the circles moving, on and on the circles moving, on and on the circles moving, siblings, family, all.
Our chalice extinguishing words today are by the Reverend Shelley Page from the UU Congregation of Lawrence, Kansas. First, listen and learn from those whose lives are so different from yours. Then, passionately speak for justice on behalf of all, that all may live in health, wholeness, and love. Blessings for the journey. Thank you to all who made this service possible, and thank you for joining us. Our postlude today will be shared in the sanctuary, but not on Zoom due to copyright restrictions. A link to the video will be posted in the chat for our online viewers to watch after the service. The video titled "The Mother," written and performed by Brandi Carlisle, is another autobiographical song in the playlist of songs of our reproductive lives. Farah Diaz-Tello writes, "It is a raw-hearted look at how simultaneously beautiful and painful it can be to become a mother, and the great rewards and sacrifices involved. It is also infused with the politics and struggle of Carlisle's experience as a queer parent who did not give birth to her daughter. She doesn't look like me. This makes the repeated refrain, "I am the mother of Evangeline," a quietly radical claim to a status that has until recently been under legal threat, with non-gestational same-sex parents treated as strangers or non-family members in hospitals within this decade. We hope our guests in the sanctuary enjoy the video and that our Zoom guests will take time to view the video after the service. I should say I also posted it to Facebook last night. We invite our Zoom guests to join in breakout rooms and our in-person guests to gather for further conversation outside, at the mall food court, or wherever else you may feel safe. Again, as you exit, please drop items in the plates. Whatever you may encounter in the coming week, know that the love of this community goes with you. And until we're together again, many blessings.